Hello.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. How are you
Well,
doing?
Cannot complain.
Good. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do it. Thanks for the opportunity.
we are super excited. So we have just started this over a month ago, and some of our favorite parts are just meeting everyone we're partners with, but meeting the leadership and getting the perspective for the podcast and for our followers. And really, just before we jump in, the Tech to Exec podcast is really for executives so they know how to talk to their IT people, IT leaders, how they talk to the executives, how to be more cyber secure, how to do better in the IT space, and how to move their businesses forward. And we are super excited you're joining us. So I'm Mike Linton, CEO of Alcom. Very nice to meet you.
And I'm
Thanks.
Josh Linton. I'm the CIO of Alcom. And really, we just want to start, Dave, with you telling us about yourself and maybe a little bit about your journey to where you are and in technology. How did you get to where you are?
Oh God. Um, I know. Yeah, that's a small question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been doing this for a long time now because I'm really old. Um, Actually, it's kind of interesting. Most of my career is a big accident. Only my first job was deliberate. So I went to school on an Air Force scholarship, and so I knew I was going to go in the military. And I picked my career field, and I went into that career field. And then after that, everything just kind of happened. Like in my own career field, they're like, "Hey, you have a computer science degree. Now you're doing cybersecurity. Now you're moving to Washington, D.C." I'm like, I don't want to move to Washington, D.C. They're like, "Cool story, buddy. You're in the military. See you in D.C." So, okay. Um, my first job out of the military, I ended up at America Online, so AOL, which, if you're old like me, you know what it is. And if you're not like me, you're like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
But a lieutenant colonel I worked for had actually found that job and said, "Hey, this isn't for me. You should talk to these folks." And I was at the far end of talking to like FBI, CIA, whatever. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll do this interview reluctantly. And I went out there and I'm like, holy crap. Like sort of the, internet with training wheels, like to actually produce that kind of outcome takes an enormous amount of technical sophistication, and they were operating at scale back in kind of late 90s, like you see Google and Facebook operating today, like proportionally, right? Like,
Hmm.
so no, AOL's not as big as Google is today, but for the time it was sort of the internet titan in terms of scale. And so I fell into that job. And then after being at AOL for a while, building their incident response capability and building a bunch of security technology stuff, because AOL was big enough you couldn't buy products to protect yourself at scale. So we had to build some things. Somebody I was in the Air Force with, Kevin Mandia, uh, we met, I think, in 96 is when we first met. He had started a company called Mandiant doing incident response consulting, and he had an idea for an endpoint product. And he came to me and said, "Hey, would you build it?" I was like, okay, the timing was good. So I'm like, sure, I'll do that. Um, so I did the Mandiant ride until about, I guess, end of 2013 is when FireEye bought us. I stayed as FireEye CTO for about a year and a half, and then was done, retired. And then a couple of folks I was with at Mandiant that had run our managed offering on top of my endpoint product had popped loose, and somehow we talked ourselves into doing a startup, which is how I ended up at Expel. So it's just a bunch of kind of happy accidents outside of my first job, which I deliberately engineered, but everything else was just fate. I don't know. I don't know what you call it. But I feel very lucky, very, very, very lucky to have had the opportunities that I've had.
So moving from building these products and working for some of, to me, the largest corporations to now running Expel, being the CEO of Expel, tell us that journey and that thinking. Like, how's that been? How long have you been doing Expel and making that happen?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So I kind of break my career down into kind of pre and post vendor. So pre vendor was about a decade as an operator. Then I spent not quite a decade at Mandiant, and now Expel is 9 years old as of this August, so coming up soon. And it's
Happy birthday.
oh well, thank you. Yeah, it just when you add all the numbers together, you still come back to God, I'm old. Oh my God, what am I doing? Um, yeah, it's a little bit mind numbing. But it's been fascinating, and I feel like a lot of security practitioners would benefit from working both sides of the table, right? So I know what my job was when I was, the defender and a purchaser, and now I know what my job is as the supplier. And there's just so many mutual myths. Like if you talk to someone that's only been a practitioner, which by the way, only I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all. But so you've been a practitioner, that's your worldview. There's a bunch of assumptions you have about how vendors behave and how they work and what they're trying to do to you if you have sort of an adversarial mindset, which is maybe the right mindset. I don't know.
And normal for cybersecurity people to have that
Yeah,
mindset.
it totally. Well, I mean, your entire. All right, I'm going to go on a rant here.
Let's do it.
I totally get that, because there is no other profession in the sort of private sector world where your job is actually fighting bad people, and the government doesn't protect you because they can't. And so you live in a world that, Bob in finance or Sally in HR or whatever. Not that their jobs aren't important; they're important jobs. They do hard work. It's just very different than being in the cyber domain, where you are literally on the front lines of nation state conflict, depending on what company you work for, and you're on your own. And so I I get it. I have a lot of sympathy for that adversarial mindset, because it's kind of required to do your day-to-day job, and nobody else in the company has to behave that way. So that I get it. That's very it's very different. But I'll try to rewind here. So I get that part. And there's a bunch of fictions, if you have not been a vendor, that you're telling yourself that are not true. And if you're a vendor and have never been a customer, same problem. Like you just don't have you haven't lived in the trenches. And I think that that's been probably one of the more interesting parts of my journey, is I've gotten the chance to do both. And I think that gives me some unique perspectives on what the day to day is actually like. Even though technology changes, attackers change, all that, the attack surface changes, fine, but there's still some foundational truths on each side of it. And I think if more people understood those, then life would be a little bit less miserable when you're trying to do things like buy security technology or services or sell them, to your customers.
Such a great perspective. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, just our most successful engineers, and I guess all of our engineers have lived on both sides of the table, because they've had that worldview, and then it resonates with our clients now. And so just you're speaking to us where it's like, yeah, we have a lot of more clout, a lot more understanding of both. And they were surprised when they came from being a customer to the client side saying, oh, that's not how things were, just like you described.
That's right. Yeah. So our chief security officer is Greg Notch. And so he's not just CISO, but CSO, because he owns not only security for Expel, but he also runs our SOC and customer success program. He was our first customer from the National Hockey League. So he crossed over and went from being a customer of Expel to Expel's primary service provider. And just the kinds of conversations we have are fascinating, because it's his first journey to this side of the table. And so he's like, oh, that's why you said that. Yeah. You can't see it until you actually sit in the seat, either way, whether it's, seller to, customer to seller, whatever it is. It's interesting to watch people go on the journey and have those eureka moments.
Any advice you would give to the customers or to the clients of what they should understand from the vendor side, or vendors, what they need to understand from the customer side, just kind of wrapping that part of the conversation.
Yeah, no, happy to. For customers, no, every vendor is not out to screw you. Um, they have to make money though, and if they don't, they won't exist to supply you product. And so, while I do think you should be a canny negotiator, while I do think you need to hold people, sort of accountable to their word, I don't think it's a right assumption that, gee, the vendor is evil. Like that's just not true. Um, and the more you can articulate the problem you're trying to solve for your business, whatever it is, the easier it is for that vendor to try to tell you where they can help and where they can't. And yes, every salesperson needs to close a deal. And so, yes, you have to be skeptical when the vendor says, well, I can do that. I mean, you do have to actually figure out, can they? But just knowing the problem you're solving and being direct is great. The other thing that I guess personally would really appreciate, like if you're not going to do a deal, if you're not going to buy a thing, if you're not going to do something, just say so. Like, don't ghost people. Don't go quiet. Just say, hey, go away. Like, I'm done. We're not doing this. Well, why not? Well, because I said so, go away. Like, that's thank you. Like, it's just when things go radio silent, that's really hard. And it's somebody's job. Like, somebody's job is to get the deal done and meet their quota, or they're going to get fired. So just be a little sympathetic in that context and be direct. And then anytime I see that, I'm really appreciative. On the selling side, you got to listen. Like, you have to listen to your customers. It could be you think you've got the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it could be about we have had this challenge ourselves at Expel. It could be that we have an opinion and we may know better. Cool story, buddy. But if your customer has a problem they want to solve, and if they are locked into the way they want to solve it, you're going to have to meet them where they are. Whether you think they're right, whether you think they're wrong, that doesn't matter. That's not going to happen in the context of selling to your customer. That's going to happen over time, maybe. And also, maybe, seller, you're wrong. Maybe your customer's right and your view of the world is incorrect. And so I guess being humble in the face of the market, being humble in the face of your customers, and also being careful about the assumptions you make about the problem they're trying to solve and what their day-to-day is actually like. Like, that's like, you've got to be an empath. Like, you have to be an empath. You have to go to them and try to walk in their shoes. If I can go ahead and use that, I mean, it's a little bit trite, but it's accurate. Like, how do you go walk that mile with them and really understand what their issues are? That's huge. And I know, coming from Mandy, and we world class incident response. Like, a bunch of us have cyber operations backgrounds, like out the yin yang, all that kind of stuff. It's really easy to get an arrogant opinion that my way is the right way, and that's not how the world works. So you really have to get humble and go to your customer and really try to understand them. And that's how you can provide value. To include, the value you might be providing is not wasting their time because you can't solve their problem. So leave them alone and then go find someone whose problem you can solve. So those are the kind of the couple of big ones. Like I said, I could go on for probably an hour on this topic alone.
Love it.
But that's those are the big things that are top of mind for me.
Those are great. I know that Mike has said many times. So my background is in engineering, and Mike creates partnerships all the time. And I'm like, wait, they're a competitor. And Mike is always telling us there's plenty of business. We can go find business. And I think it's kind of this same idea. We don't need to fight our way into these deals sometimes, right? And we can go solve the problems and find where we can really be most beneficial and help our customers, right? And I think that's such great advice and a great way to look at it. One thing, as you were talking, and I'd be so interested with your varied background, but what is there a kind of a story that stands out, whether it's related to Expel or not, that where you've seen great success in kind of maybe stopping an attack, or even a great failure that you'd wish somebody had done something better or different that you could share with us?
I'll share a couple things. One, just on the failure side. First, any security vendor, whether your product, services, a blend, kind of like we are, whatever it is, that tells you there are no failures is lying, because there's always a failure, right? Because you've got the attack surface is changing, the product landscape and what customers deploy to protect themselves is changing, and then the attacker is changing all at the same time. And so there's no question that there's going to be failure. I'll just say on the failure front, because I'm not going to, speak to a customer situation.
Sure.
In this case, I just can't. But when we fail, because it does happen, what we try to do is make sure that we just own it. Like, oh, yep, we screwed that up. To include, if it's a failure scenario where the customer wouldn't have even noticed, meaning there was no adverse impact. And so we try to make sure that we own those moments, because we know they will exist. We'll go back to the dialogue we had earlier. We are the customer's line of defense. In some cases, against nation states, like to say, well, we never fail, is total hubris. There is no security vendor on the planet, up to including name the big names, that can say they never fail. Not true. And so making sure our customer can trust us in those moments so that they know when there's a problem, I think is key. When I think about positive stories, of which we have many, this is one of those things like I really like about our job. So, okay, yeah, we're on the front lines against nation states and blah, 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 which is, like it's terrifying. But sometimes we're protecting organizations where stuff really matters. For example, we do Dayton Children's Hospital. We're literally protecting an organization that saves the lives of kids. Like, how many people get to say that when they get up in the morning and go to work? There are, organizations I can't name, but that are nonprofits that all of you would know if I gave you the names, and they would say, "Wow, like we get to sleep at night because you've got our back." And then we get to deploy donations, or we get to have this real life impact for humans in this context, and we're there. We have in the past, again without naming names, defended democracy itself. Like, who gets to say that? Like, that's so cool. So it's those kinds. We love every customer, and obviously we, in some cases, like let's say maybe you're not one of those kinds of organizations, but you're, who knows, some large commercial enterprise. We're still protecting that company's ability to pay its employees. Like, that's awesome. Like, how cool is that? And so every time we go, alert to fix in less than 20 minutes, every time we shut something down, every time, we do make the bad nation state actors, or other, criminal go away, like it's super cool. It's just fun. Like, we get to be the good guys. That's so awesome. So I don't know if I can't get too specific, about
That's
specific
great.
customers in this space, but this is the kind of stuff, like, this is why I'm still, 30 years in, almost 30 years in, 29 years in, doing this, is because it just matters. It's such a unique place to be. Love doing it.
I
That's
love that.
amazing.
Can you tell us about Expel? What makes you different? This is a busy space. I mean,
Sure.
I can tell you're building a culture of customers, of defending customers, and that it works. And we've experienced that. We have customers that have deployed Expel and been so happy with it. And so thank you for building a great company, a great team, a great product, a great service. Tell us about Expel. What would you want everyone to know about Expel?
Our thought process was, informed by a lot of our lessons, learned at Mandiant. So Yannick Korf, Justin Biko, and myself are the co-founders. They had built an MDR offering at Mandiant on top of my endpoint product. And the thing that we thought was, there's a couple gaps that we see. One is a lot of times customers really do want to deploy their own security stack, whatever it is. Maybe they're a single vendor, maybe they're multi-vendor. Over time, it probably changes. Like maybe you're a single vendor this year, and 5 years from now, you're multi-vendor, best of breed, whatever. But you want to operationalize the stuff you've already invested in. So that was one thing that we saw and said, okay, how do we enable that for customers so that they can, pick their stack of choice and change it over time. So, okay, cool. The other thing we saw was, and this was true at Mandiant, is the MDR space are all really services businesses. And that's okay. It's just that with a services business, it's people powered, right? And so as you add customers, you have to add your own people. And so it tends to happen is scale and quality have this adversarial relationship that kind of do this. So if you scale really fast, your quality drops because you had to dump a bunch of humans in, and now you've got to kind of manage that problem. And if you want to keep the quality high, you have to limit how many people you can actually help. And we said, okay, that's broken. So how do we make scale and quality possible at the same time and adapt to the choices our customers had made about the technology they would like to deploy to protect themselves? Because they know their business better than I do. So who am I to say you should use this or you should use that? Like, you probably know more than me. What you want is an outcome from that investment. And so that's what we did. We said, hey, let's build technology in the middle of our business so that we can have scale and quality. It's still a service. Like, we still have human beings, 24/7 SOC operators that are, awesome. But let's give them a fighting chance at scale to produce a high quality outcome. Like, that's the thing that we think people want for the kinds of customers that we service. So, hey, check the box, compliance, et cetera. Okay, I'm probably not your person. You haven't made security investments, like you don't have an endpoint thingy or a network thingy or a SIM thingy or whatever. Okay, I'm not going to bring that with me. When you buy those things, I will help you produce the outcome you're trying to produce, so you don't have to, and do so in a way that matches the level that you would expect if you hired your own people. So that's what we do. Alert to fix less, than 20 minutes faster than you can get a pizza delivered. And so we've got a good track record. Again, never going to say we're perfect. That's never true. But our SOC is pretty damn good. And the technology they work on that we've built to run this business lets us keep that up. So customer 500 and customer 5, same experience.
How would you want an IT leader to explain what you do to an executive in 30 seconds and why it matters?
I guess the fast pitch would be, hey, we've got to protect ourselves 24/7. We can either hire all the people and the care and feeding to do that, or we can hire someone who can do it better than we can for a lot less money, and produce that outcome so that we don't have, now a list of headlines. This happened, or this happened, or this happened, or this happened. And so that's the choice. You either have to play ball and make the investment and own that problem yourself, or you better get someone else to do it. And whoever does it, you better be able to trust. That's really the decision that you're making. At the end of the day, a choice between, build and buy. And whenever you build, if you're not a bank or a defense contractor, you're not actually in the security business. You're a cost center.
Yeah.
It's going to be real hard to be good at that.
You mentioned even doing it in-house, similar problem to building, the quality and the scale as your business builds and you're adding more people to your security team and you've got to train them up, and now they're trying to
That's
get
right.
themselves trained in order to defend against these attackers who are constantly attacking. And so, partnering with somebody who can help you do that, like what you've said, building that into your process, I think makes so much sense for an organization to
Yeah.
consider, rather than
And
trying to figure that out themselves, right? Because it's similar problem internally.
and there's there are security problems that really only an organization can solve for itself, but they tend to be very close to the business, require a lot of context. There's a lot of human dynamic involved in that. Awesome. Then spend your time on that, and then get rid of all the other stuff that you don't need to spend time on. And what that does is makes your program more valuable to the business. We have a number example. We have a number of airlines that are customers. And you can see a logo on our website if you go look. I can't secure that airplane. Like I can't. Like that's a very specialized, highly context sensitive part of the business. But what I can do is do the rest of this other work over here, so some other people at that customer can go get close to that airplane and spend their time there. Like that's really the math that you're looking at, is how do you generate more value for your business? The answer is spend your time on things custom to your business and get the rest of it handled in a way that's very cost effective and outcome effective, so that you don't have to do it.
What piece of advice would you leave for guidance? I'm going to use the word guidance instead of advice. No
Okay.
one wants to hear advice. For executives
I like that.
making IT decisions, and then also IT leaders trying to get their executives on board.
First, I will say I love your statement that nobody wants advice, because I tend to agree with you. Advice is arrogant. Advice is, well, why don't you just? It's like, okay, you don't know the context of that person you're talking to. And so to tell them that they should just go do something is hubris. And so agree, let me not do that. What I will do is tell you just a generalized story of what I see, particularly in the cyber world today, for executives trying to manage that problem, be they IT, be they cyber specific executives, what have you. Um, Learn to speak the language of the business, understand how to talk to your CFO, because the days of, the cyber budget goes up 10% every year, that's over. Like it's gone. Like forget it. So you have to be able to talk to the financial arm of your business in terms of outcomes that the business wants. And what that means is it's not alerts and threats and all that stuff. Not that those stories aren't important, they are, but you have to be able to talk in terms of, how do I make it possible for the business to achieve this thing with minimal disruption, so that the top line impact is as powerful as it can possibly be? So go figure out how to become a student of that. Know your CFO, know the financial analysts, learn how they talk, and figure out how to craft your storyline into something they will understand. And then that will give you much more success in trying to enact a strategy for the business, that produces the outcome that you're looking for, which is, you successfully mitigate risks in the context of getting breached. And it's improving. Like the number of cyber executives that I talk to that get this is increasing, but I would be lying if I said it was a majority. And so I really think in this day and age, you have to be able to talk that language, and you've got to be able to talk in terms of positive outcomes, not just risk. And so connect yourself to the business, and then you will find yourself, I think, much more successful in implementing the programs that because you've been a cyber operator, you've been doing stuff, like the bad guys, what's going to go on, but you got to help the business understand it in their terms. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I would advocate for people to pay attention to. And this comes from watching what happens when people do, and then when they do not, and what happens to their program as a result.
Thanks for sharing that guidance. I think it's amazing, and we like, for all of our listeners, if you want to learn more about Expel, we'll have links in the show notes. So please check that out, and really appreciate you joining us today.
Awesome. Well, hey, Josh, Mike, really glad to be here. I'm glad to be working with you, and hope to see you guys again sometime soon.